it's charging at least a little bit, so I can actually do an audio version. Now, what I want to talk about today is a theory. A theory I just kind of came up with. I don't think I've heard anybody talk about this. But what if One Punch Man has two timelines, right? The webcomic timeline and the manga timeline. Timeline. Jesus. In the manga timeline, right? Now, in the manga timeline, Garo gets powers from God. In the webcomic timeline, Garo does not, right? And I think God goes back in time, and that's why there's been a few changes, right? I'm not including the retcons that Murata does, because I think that's just one wanting to portray the story differently. But why I'm saying that is, if you think about it, Saitama did not need to defeat Garo using space-time continuum and breaking space and time and going backwards in time and punching him. You know what I'm saying? He did not need to do it that way. I think there's a reason he decided to do it that way. I think one wanted to do it that way because I think it gave... It opened the door for him to do different things in the future, right? Because I think One Punch Man will eventually reach like galactic scales, possibly. And so space and time, will eventually have to get ripped in order for stuff like that to happen. And if you think about it, right? So let's say the webcomic is the original timeline, right? God goes back, like he sees Garo, God obviously is probably ahead of time even. Or maybe he just saw, the fight between Garo and Saitama and was like, this guy was this strong without my help. What if I gave him my help? Right? And that's where God kind of tricked Garo into giving him powers. And that's how he became so strong that he pushed Saitama even further than the webcomic version did. Because the webcomic version didn't really push Saitama. Saitama was just impressed that he was actually fighting well. And then disappointed that, the more monster fight he became, the less good at fighting he was. And we actually get that timeline in the manga as well, which is really interesting. I think that was another. Now I know those redraws and stuff, but I think that one was that those chapters changed so significantly that I don't know if that's all right. You know what I'm saying? I think that was another timeline change by God again. I think God is fucking around with the timeline. Now it's not, again, I don't think it explains every retcon, but I think that one specifically, because the fight ended really, really quickly. And then, they were having a conversation in the hut. And then it's like time went backwards. And God prevented that conversation by stepping foot himself. Now, you could attribute that part to retcon. I'm not going to lie to you. I think that's completely reasonable as well. But I just think the coincidence there is too high because that fight finished. It was not going through no space and time continuum, nothing. You know what I'm saying? And that seems like too massive of a difference. The other fight is like, changing maybe how the fight ends a little bit, changing this a little bit. But that one was like a significant change. Like the fight ended, he went from ending to nowhere near ending. You know what I mean? It was really weird. But yeah, I think that was, because they were gonna like have a conversation in a hut, and people were really disappointed. The manga, the webcomic fans like myself were like, "Damn, that's it! Like that's all Garo was in the manga." And then people then that didn't read the webcomic were like, "Oh, you all hyped Garo up so much," and we're like, "Bro, we obviously hyped him up because the webcomic fight was fucking insane, and the manga just didn't replicate it well. What can we do?" But then obviously the manga went ahead and just did some crazy shit. But yeah, I think it kind of, it can be used as well to kind of explain all those retcons if one decides to eventually do that later. But I think it doesn't go against anything that's happening so far, whether in the manga or the webcomic. Now, in the webcomic, there's no time traveling fiascos yet. We still haven't even met. What's his name? The number one hero, Blast. We still haven't met Blast once in the webcomic yet. Right? He's still a silhouette in the webcomic. So that just tells you that the timelines might be different. And one of the reasons maybe, you know, um, I think that he wanted Garo to get so strong was maybe to get rid of Blast and from fighting him, because Blast is, actively going after those cubes and actively going to different worlds and different planets and perhaps different dimensions to fight off God with his crew. So I think perhaps he was hoping that this guy might be able to defeat Saitama, and then that would force Blast to go there. And if Blast goes there, perhaps he could even defeat Blast, or at least distract Blast long enough that he can sort out, maybe, I don't know. There could be many different circumstances that he decided to do that. And I think that's really, really interesting because, again, right now the manga has almost caught up to the webcomic, because the webcomic went on like a 2-3 years hiatus, and now it's just dropping constantly. So the timeline is almost continuing, because I think the timeline might even begin to overlap at some point. I think within the next 2-3 years, the timelines might overlap, and that would be so, so cool to see. Because if the manga version is exactly what one wants, and no longer the webcomic, and he thinks that the webcomic doesn't tell the story how he wanted to do it, he would have stopped doing the webcomic, because he doesn't have to do the webcomic, right? But yet he does. You know what I'm saying? He does. It takes him longer, perhaps because he's trying to fit in all the holes and plug in the holes between the two worlds. Perhaps that's why he's doing it. Now, a lot of this is my assumptions completely, but I'm just arguing that it can't really be disproved, right? I think it makes sense because Saitama time traveled and he learned it. That means Blast might be able to have similar abilities. And, well, we know for a fact God must have similar abilities. And perhaps the only thing that was preventing God from changing too much is Blast also being able to have that ability, right? And Saitama learning it is obviously something he does not want, because if Saitama learns it, that's probably going to fuck up his plans more, considering, he already has Blast to deal with. And Blast is not even on Earth because he's gone directly to deal with God. And at some point, Saitama might have to do that as well. I think Saitama and Genos and them are going to play the key role in doing that. I think Blast is going to also play a key role. And I think Blue is going to play a key role. And I think Garo is going to play a big key role. I think those are the big characters. Tatsumaki and them, of course, are always going to play a big role. And Fubuki. But there's so many characters that are relevant in the webcomic. In the manga too, but I think in the webcomic even more so to a certain degree. Because the Neo heroes are essentially about to be introduced. I mean, basically being introduced already in the manga, which means that we're not too far away from seeing Blue and meeting Blue. I think this Blue might even be stronger than the webcomic version. And the thing is, with the webcomic version, that Blue is wearing limiters at all times, so we never see his full strength at display. But we know he's definitely like dragon, like high, maybe slightly above dragon in strength. But yeah, what do you guys think of that theory? Do you guys think that that's like a plausible theory, that there could be two potential timelines happening simultaneously, and God is almost trying to see which one guarantees his victory, you know what I'm saying, or guarantees his return? Because I think God is trying to come back to the physical world, but he can't fully interact with it without being accepted type shit, right? Because again, we saw that it didn't seem like Saitama saw those legs, but Garo did, because he was trying to communicate with Garo and not Saitama. So he obviously has like special, clairvoyance abilities and all of that jazz. So I'm really excited to see what happens in both. I think the manga is going on a hiatus, potentially, allegedly. Although, like, it could happen that it goes on a hiatus next month or the month after. One Punch Man manga drops whenever it drops. Like, no deal, even though they are on Shonen Jump, no deal allows them to not be weekly, to not be monthly. They can literally post the comic whenever they feel like posting the comic on any site whenever they feel like it. Murata directly links the free version of that shit, like, on his Twitter every time he drops it. Like, they don't care. Like, one posted his thing on his website for free. Like, they don't care. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's kind of the beauty of One Punch Man. It is such like an open canvas almost, right? And there's so much potential in which way it can go. And I trust One just by the way he finished Mob Psycho 100, which is sensational. And in Mob Psycho, if you look at the teams and stuff, Mob ends up being the final villain, like him against himself. But he needed the help of everybody else in order to stop him. And he was also the one above all in his world. He was way stronger than everybody else, but he was always holding himself back. And he pushed the other version of himself away. And that other version is anger and rage has been building up and building up. And that's where it explodes all the time. And he takes over. So I think if you look at One Punch Man and Saitama, I think we might end up in a similar kind of morality situation. I think the people that are going to have to stop Saitama are Garo, Fubuki, and perhaps even Tatsumaki, and obviously Genos. You know what I'm saying? I think those are the people that will have to bring him back, because he's the one that's almost brought them back. You know what I'm saying? And I think in return, they might need to bring him back, because I think he might end up in a situation where he's like, fuck everything, and loses his mind. And we've seen hints of it a lot more probably in the manga than I think the webcomic. In his fight against Garo, he was literally like, I'm getting annoyed. I might just punch the world and destroy it all. You know what I'm saying? So we have to like bear that in mind, right? Especially once like Genos died type shit, like he almost didn't feel like he had anything to really fight for. Like he was losing it a little bit. He was snapping. You know what I'm saying? He was holding Genos' core in his hand, and he was not. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think he's on that brink. Genos is his best friend, whether he admits it or not. Genos is his best friend. He's his pupil. He's also friends with King now. I think those are the two people that he fully considers friends. He does also, I think, he's close enough to Silver Fang, but I wouldn't say to him they're not quite friends yet. I think with Fubuki follows him around and stuff, and he doesn't like hate it or whatever. But I think they've become friends. But he can go out of his way to find Genos. He can go out of the way to find King. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't really go out of the way to find everybody else. So I think that's kind of the difference there. But I'm really excited to see what you guys think about this timeline thing. I really think it's a possibility, because I think that's why there's so many redraws and so many reshifts, because I think at some point consider that, right? But he wasn't sure, but I think now he's certain. And I think that's why the webcomic's back. I think that's why he took 2 years off, because I think, while he was writing the storyboards for the manga, I think he thought, what if, you know what I'm saying? And I think that door was opened. And I think it's something that could potentially end up happening. Imagine seeing the two art styles clash. That would be so unreal. Like, you have one, art style mixed in with Murata's, and the two worlds almost collapsing into each other. That would be so cool. Or even just like the two worlds parallel, and Saitama meeting Saitama and both of them realizing, you know what I'm saying, will they punch each other? Or even Blast coming through. You know what I'm saying? Imagine if the manga Blast pulls up to the webcomic. That would be so sensate. I'll be mind fucking, like, that would be insane. And he pulls up and he's like, I'm not the Blast that you know. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm here to da-da-da. And he grabs Saitama so that two Saitamas pull up and fight God or whatever. I don't know. Some shit like that. But that could be cool. I don't know. Maybe that idea wasn't the best idea. But, like, you know what I mean? Those potentials, guys. Those potential. Anyway, maybe we get two endings. That would be amazing. If we get two different endings, maybe the webcomic Saitama loses. Right? Or loses his mind. Or maybe the manga version loses his mind. And they need the other version to defeat him. You know what I'm saying? So there's so many ways that this story could go. Saitama could ultimately end up being the final villain, right? Because one of them, after defeating God, might get slightly corrupted by God, right? Or even just get sick of everything, or what, for some reason. You know what I'm saying? Maybe he loses Genos, he loses Fubuki, he loses Tatsumaki, he loses Flashy Flash, he loses King, he loses Silver Fang, he loses Garo, and he just snaps. You know what I'm saying? But then the time traveling version, the manga version, doesn't, and he has to fight him. That could be like, there's so many ways that the story could end as a conclusion because of the two timeline potential, if that actually is true. But let me know, comment down below what you guys think. It's been your boy Supreme Tree to God. I am out.